The Washington Commanders have come to town, and we have a lot to talk about on today's show. Mike McDaniel kind of mentioned that some starters may play against Washington in the second preseason game. We'll talk about that. We got some injury updates. Odell Beckham Jr., we saw him at practice. We'll get into more about that, but also an update on Bradley Chubb. And then we also will round out today's episode by talking about some of the news, highlights, and notes that came out from the Dolphins versus Commanders joint practice. But first, make sure you are subscribe to the channel, because as we do every week, we play a team here at Chat Sports. We do a sub battle as well as the game that actually gets played on the weekend. So help us out. We're winning right now, but I want to win the race to 100 as we still have a long way to go to win the battle against the Commanders. Hit that sub button so we could beat Washington, but also you're going to get the best Dolphins coverage on a daily basis. I recommend you subscribe. All right, let's get into the first topic on today's show. It has to do with Mike McDaniel and what he said on the Dolphins starters potentially playing. Barry Jackson reported the news today that was about the starters, saying that if Mike McDaniel, when asked about if the starters will play, said that some will play. Not all, but some, and the staff will decide which starters will play Saturday. Generally wants the starters to get some action this upcoming game, and I do think it's smart to play at least some starters, make sure they get some action, and specifically talking about quarterback Tua Tagovailoa. I'd love to see Tua get at least one drive against the Washington Commanders in this game, because I do believe, even for quarterbacks, it is important for them to get live game reps where they have pads on, they have the potential of getting hit, so when they go out there in week one, they're not seeing these live padded defensive linemen come at them trying to rip their head off for the very first time. Now, if I had to predict what starters Mike McDaniel was talking about, I'm not so sure Tua actually will see the field. Now, I do think he will. Like I said, Josh Allen got a full quarter. Patrick Mahomes is playing a full half of football this upcoming weekend. So it's like starters do play, and I don't think Miami should hold them out. But if I had to bet on what starters we will end up seeing for the Miami Dolphins, I think we will see Chop Robinson make his Dolphins debut. He did not play in the first preseason game. I expect him to play this upcoming Saturday. I think Emmanuel Ogbah will get some game action as well, as he was not with the team obviously all summer, has had a strong camp. I'd like to see him. I think the offensive line is something that we are going to see. Robert Jones, who's the starting left guard projected player right now, Liam Eichenberg, who's the projected starting center or right guard with Aaron Brewer on injury, and Austin Jackson. I think we should see the three of them. I don't know if they're going to play too long, but at least one or two drives to get them some game action. I think Jonnu Smith and Durham Smythe might play as well. Maybe one of them sits, but I think Smith or Smythe should see the field, and I believe Kader Kohu will also play for the Dolphins this weekend as well. Ramsey will not play, that's for sure, with him nursing an injury right now. Kendall Fuller, veteran, don't know if he'll see the field, but they should at least get Kader Kohu some reps on the field. These are the 8 guys that I believe are starters for the Dolphins that I would like to see and I think should play on this upcoming game against the Washington Commanders. All right, let's move over to the injury side of today's show with a Bradley Chubb injury update. He still remains on the PUP list after tearing his ACL just at the end of last season, but Mike McDaniel shared some progress, if you will. Here's what McDaniel said. So there's no timeline. That's not great. They're just focusing on him having no setbacks and progressing in his rehab. That's what Joe Shad say, but I also want to show this from Marcel, saying specifically he's still working his way back from a torn ACL at the end of last season. They're being wise behind his years in terms of not overstepping boundaries too soon with his rehab. Listen, it's good that we at least have Jalen Phillips off the PUP list, so it gives us a little more time to get Bradley Chubb back, but it does feel like it's going to be a little bit longer for Chubb to return. Maybe the full month of September is out of the question. Week 5, Week 6 is a return for the Dolphins. They do have an early bye week. Maybe it's going to be after that. All right, Jody Fortson Jr., the tight end, was in a red jersey, which means he was participating in some drills but was non-contact. He did suffer a stinger in that game against the Falcons last Friday and hasn't really practiced all week long, but if he's in a red jersey today, I do think he'll ultimately end up going on Saturday, and that's important for him because he needs to really start the ball out in these next 2 weeks in the final 2 preseason games if he wants to somehow overtake Julian Hill, Durham Smythe, or Jonnu Smith for a roster spot, which it seems very unlikely he's going to be able to do that. So my bold prediction that he was going to be on this roster, It doesn't look too good right now. All right, Jalen Ramsey did not participate in practice once again. We spoke yesterday afternoon about how he was nursing a minor injury right now, and I'm not shocked that he didn't participate. I think he should just probably be put in a ice chamber and say, all right, we won't pull you out of there until week 1 against the Jacksonville Jaguars. His health is paramount to the success of this defense this upcoming year, so making sure he is fully healthy for week 1 should be at the top of the priority list for the Miami Dolphins. All right, let's get to some Odell Beckham Jr. news, because this one shocked me. And by the way, if you didn't see, OBJ went on a tirade yesterday on Twitter, responding to a couple people mentioning his injury status. You don't know anything. The organization knows where I'm at because someone suggested that Odell Beckham Jr. is pulling a Will Fuller, which actually cracked me up, and just was never going to play for the Dolphins. But OBJ shut that down. And then was seen at practice. He was doing some conditioning on the side. It's the first time that we really have seen OBJ at all attend any Dolphins practice. So this is a really good first step for Miami and Odell Beckham. Like, I don't think he's going to be ready for week 1. I've been pretty clear on that. But at least we are starting to see him in a Dolphins uniform and go through some stuff just to start ramp up. He'll get his conditioning under him. Then hopefully he'll get some live practice reps with Tua, Tyreek Hill, hopefully Waddle, who still remains out with an injury as well, so they can start to develop some rapport with Tua Tagovailoa, which we know Tyreek and Jaylen have, but it is very important in this type of offense Mike McDaniel wants to run to make sure that your quarterbacks and wide receivers are on the same page, because it's so much about speed, timing, accuracy, and if Tua and OBJ have never worked together in live reps, it might take a while for those two to get in sync, so hopefully they start to get back onto the practice field together and really get that connection rolling. All right, we're going to get to some practice notes coming up in just a second, but there has been a lot of injury news for the Miami Dolphins this training camp, just like last year. Which one concerns you the most? It could be Bradley Chubb and his return, could be Jalen Ramsey, Javon Holland, Odell Beckham Jr. It doesn't matter. Drop which injury concerns you the most for the Miami Dolphins. All right, joint practice takeaways between Miami and Washington. Number 1, I wish Miami was healthy because it really is very difficult to observe how these two teams fare against each other when your team is missing half its starters. Like on offense, there's so many people missing for the Miami Dolphins. On defense, there's even more people missing, at least just being held out because they don't want them to suffer a setback or another different injury. But I will say this, Jayden Daniels looks good for Washington. All reports are that Daniels was dominating the portion of the red zone practice where the Commanders start in the red zone, Dolphins defense in the red zone, and it's obviously very difficult for the defense to succeed in red zone work because, well, they're really right there in the red zone and you have some more or less space to cover, so it's like quick movements, right? But either way, it's hard to really justify if we should be concerned about the Dolphins defense due to there being so many starters out. Now, I will say this. Even though Jayden Daniels looked good and the Washington offense dominated the red zone portion, the Dolphins defense did bounce back in a pretty big way. When they got to 11 on 11 and they got to like full field work, the Dolphins defense did show up to play and really corrected course to make it a much more even matchup rather than it being favored towards Washington. Travis had the report that the Dolphins defense had 3 wins in a row when it got to 11 on 11 work. That included a David Long Jr. blow up in the check down after Jayden Daniels passed. Emmanuel Ogbah had a great play blowing up a run for a loss as he continues his strong play this training camp and preseason. And my goodness, this could be an all-time like, wow, did we get lucky that Shaq Barrett retired because Emmanuel Ogbah's been so good in camp and he might be in for a massive season. And then Kader Coe, who also had a really good incompletion and PBU over the middle of the field as he looks to have a bounce-back season after a little bit of a sophomore slump, if you will. Good defensive performances at times today. We also saw some good stuff from Chop Robinson and Kendall Fuller, who we'll talk about in just a second. But Dolphins game days are here, and if you want to represent the Dolphins every single game day, you need to get some jerseys, whether it be a Waddle, a Jalen Ramsey, a Tyreek Hill, Tua, Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, a rookie like Malik Washington, or Jalen Wright, or Chop Robinson. It does not matter. Get your Dolphins jerseys today, right now at chatsports.com/Dolphins jersey. Get them now so you get them before the games actually count in just about 3 weeks. Like I said, chatsports.com/Dolphins jersey. That link will be in the description and comments of today's video. I mentioned Kendall Fuller just a second ago. He was great today. And I expected Kendall Fuller to have a good day of practice. Why? Well, you're always going to have juice going up against your former team, right? He was with Washington, obviously, last season. So him leaving them in free agency, he wanted to show that he still is that dude. He was rocking the orange jersey today, which might be a little of a mental tactic by Mike McDaniel and his coaching staff to give him an orange jersey on the day that he was practicing against his former team. Or it could just showcase that he was really good on Wednesday's practice, which gave him that orange jersey. But Fuller had probably the highlight of today's practice for the Miami Dolphins, offense or defense, because the team went inside the building, not outside. They went inside to do a late game situation. It lasted one play in that situation. Why did it only last one play? It's because Kendall Fuller intercepted Jayden Daniels after Terry McLaurin might have slipped on the route, fell down. Either way, Kendall Fuller in coverage with the wide receiver one for the Commanders picks off the rookie Jayden Daniels. Practice ends, buzzer beater, if you will. The Dolphins defense and team went nuts. They all swarmed Kendall Fuller. It's just a really cool moment for the Dolphins team to have his back in a big-time play in practice against his former team. But this really goes to a larger talking point, right? And I've mentioned it multiple times this offseason. I know Xavier Howard was really good for the Dolphins in his career. One of the best Dolphins players in the past 10 years for Miami. But Kendall Fuller, at this stage of each of their respective careers, is a massive upgrade. It is. I think Kendall Fuller is going to have a terrific year as CB2 for the Dolphins, opposite of Jalen Ramsey. Those two create, I think, a top 3, top 5 cornerback duo in the NFL, and I don't really think it's debatable. If those guys stay healthy, you're going to have 2 lockdown corners that can play zone, man on the boundary, with a rotation of safeties and corners playing the nickel. This Dolphins secondary might be one of the strongest points of this team. Honestly, I'd probably put it in the top 3 for sure. In terms of this Dolphins team, I think wide receiver is the best part. Running back might be 2, and then cornerbacks might be 3 because of how well Kendall Fuller will make this secondary play. Are you excited for Kendall Fuller? If you couldn't tell, I clearly am. So I'm typing my 2 9s down in the comment section. But if you're excited for Kendall Fuller on this Miami Dolphins team, type those 29s down in the comment section right now. All right, last thing. I don't really think people are sleeping on the Dolphins' run game, but I think people are at the same time. And this is really not me telling the Dolphins fans to not sleep on the running game, because I know y'all really like Raheem Mostert, Jalen Wright, and Devon Achane. It's more of me just speaking to the National Football League, because when you think of the Miami Dolphins offense, you think of the explosive deep passes between Tua, Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, the creativity on the offensive end from Mike McDaniel. Those make the headlines. But I think the most consistent and most dominant part of this Dolphins offense this upcoming year might actually be the running game trio of Raheem Mostert, Jalen Wright, and Devon Achane. You have 3 guys that run sub 4.4 40-yard dashes. We know Achane's blazing speed. Jalen Wright has looked terrific over the past couple weeks after a slow start to camp, but he's really ramped it up and been super impactful. He's going to be your RB3. Raheem Mostert spoke to the media after practice today, and he was blushing about Jalen Wright's development and how good he is already looking and growing this early in his career. And then Mostert, who led the league in rushing touchdowns last year with 18. Yes, the offensive line is going to be a question at time, but with the speed of these running backs, the vision, the cutback, the physicality at times too, these running backs are going to be very, very dynamic, and it would not shock me if we talk more about the running game being dominant for the Dolphins more than the passing game this upcoming regular season. All right, that's going to do it for today's show. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Like I said, got to beat the Commanders in our week-long sub battle, but we're also going to be live on Saturday night for the Dolphins' second preseason game against Washington. So make sure you subscribe. Join us. It's going to be myself, producer Matt Goldman. It's going to be a ton of fun. So hopefully I see you there.